مساء الخير وأهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من واشنطن أونلاين. يؤكد الرئيس أردوغان إجراء الانتخابات التركية في موعدها المحدد، بينما تركز الحكومة التركية على الداخل وحل تداعيات الزلزال المدمر. فهل تلعب كل هذه المتغيرات في صالح الإدارة الذاتية وقوات سوريا الديمقراطية؟ هذا ما أبحثه في حلقة اليوم من واشنطن أونلاين، وضيوفي لهذه الحلقة هما السيدة أوزي بولوت، الكاتبة والباحثة السياسية التركية، تنضم إلينا من أثينا عبر سكايب. أبدأ هذه الحلقة مع ضيفتي السيدة أوزي بولوت، تنضم إلينا من أثينا. أهلا وسهلا بك سيدة أوزي. إذن الرئيس أردوغان يؤكد إجراء الانتخابات التركية المقبلة في موعدها رغم كارثة الزلزال، رغم كل الفوضى المحيطة بالمشهد التركي اليوم. يريد الرئيس أردوغان الذهاب إلى الانتخابات كما كان مقرر لها، ولكن أيضا يتهم اليوم المعارضة التركية بأنها تستغل الوضع، تستغل الأوضاع الإنسانية للتقليل من حظوظ الرئيس أردوغان في الانتخابات. كيف يمكن أن تؤثر كارثة الزلزال على الانتخابات المقبلة، على قرارات الناخب التركي؟
Well, it's just so tragic that Erdogan is still thinking about the elections and blaming his failure to help the earthquake survivors or victims on the opposition, because it just shows that the only thing he cares about is his own power and his own authority. And the way he responded to the earthquake by threatening the Turkish people, or Kurdish people, I mean the people in Turkey, and by harassing them, by saying that you are taking advantage of the earthquake, it just shows that he has no sympathy or care for the victims. He's only thinking about if he will win the elections. He could have responded to this earthquake so differently. But since the earthquake, he has been, first of all, the arrest of people in Turkey, of dissidents, hasn't stopped. The so-called security forces are still arresting people if they criticize the government's response to the earthquake, and the journalists are being harassed and arrested, even while they're trying to cover the earthquake on the ground. So, of course, Erdogan is angry because the people in Turkey are rightfully and understandably outraged at the lack of timely response by the government to this horrible tragedy. The journalists on the ground are saying that the government hasn't sent any aid, any rescue teams to the victims for 2 days, for 50 hours. Those people were helplessly waiting for some rescue team, for some aid under the rubble of their collapsed homes. And the only thing Erdogan is talking about is when the elections will take place or what the opposition is doing, because he seems so irresponsible and it doesn't seem like he has any empathy or love or compassion for the victims. People are angry, and this will definitely affect election results in Turkey. That's what I think.
الرئيس أردوغان تحدث عن أهداف فيها الكثير من التفاؤل. قال أننا سنعيد إعمار كل ما تهدم خلال عام واحد فقط، سنقوم بتعويض كل المتضررين. ما الذي بدأ من هذه الجهود؟ يعني إذا كنا نتوقع أن يعاد إعمار كل المباني خلال فترة لا تتجاوز العام، يجب أن يكون هناك عمل قد بدأ فعلا على إعادة الإعمار.
Well, first of all, according to some estimates, the death toll is at least 300,000. 300,000 people are dead because of these earthquakes, but it's not just because of the earthquakes. The death toll is so high because of the corruption in the construction sector, which was enabled by the government itself, and because the government hasn't sent any aid or rescue team to the victims for several days. So we know that the government is responsible for the extremely high death toll, and the corruption in the construction sector in Turkey is well documented. Even before Erdogan became the president, when he was the mayor of Istanbul, he was still enabling corrupt builders in Turkey. He was enacting legislation, and after he became president, he enacted legislation for corrupt builders so that all the poorly or illegally built houses were just allowed to stay the way that they were. What the government should have done was to either rebuild those homes, or fabricate them in a more secure way, or tell the property owners to take some precautions to let them know that this is an earthquake zone. There will be an earthquake here. A lot of professors, a lot of experts on earthquakes have warned the government that an earthquake is going to happen here, but the government turned a blind eye. They enabled this massive corruption in the construction sector. That's why all these houses just collapse like paper, like they were made of paper. And today the government is talking about building new homes. First of all, millions of people are homeless right now. They don't even have rents. And the government is obstructing the aid work of opposition forces, opposition groups, because, like I said, the government only cares about its own power, and they don't want the opposition groups to do good voluntary aid work on the ground. So no, the government hasn't started any actual rebuilding effort in the region, and the people, so many people, hundreds of thousands, are homeless without their rent, and they need shelter, they need aid, they need food, they need heat, but they're not given any of that. So there are a lot of speculations as to why the government has been so slow and so incompetent in its efforts to help the victims. Some people on the ground claim that the government is ignoring them or obstructing the aid work because the victims are either Kurdish or Alawi. They say that they are once again victims of the government's political, ethnic, and religious bias. So it's such a horrible tragedy, but it's not just a natural disaster. This disaster is mostly man-made, and the main one responsible for this horrible, horrible destruction and death, that is unfortunately the regime itself.
وزي قبل كارثة الزلزال كنا نسمع من الرئيس أردوغان حديث عن غزو جديد لشمال شرق سوريا، لهجة تصعيدية مع اليونان. هل تغيرت اليوم السياسات الخارجية التركية؟ هل تتغير أولويات الحكومة التركية مع كارثة الزلزال؟
I wish that was the case, but unfortunately even today the Turkish military carried out airstrikes against the Yazidi homeland of Sinjar in Iraq. And I don't know if there are casualties yet, but there is definitely some physical damage and destruction in Sinjar. And those are Yazidis, those are genocide survivors who have been struggling to survive since 2014, since the genocide that was carried out by ISIS. So, and also, right after the earthquake, when people were waiting for help under the rubble of their homes, the Turkish military was bombing Syrian forces, Kurdish forces in Syria. They should have brought some help to their own people to rescue them, to rescue the last survivors of the earthquake. But instead, they preferred to kill and destroy Kurds and Yazidis. Unfortunately, I don't think the foreign policy of Turkey targeting Iraq, Syria, Kurds, and Yazidis will change. I don't think it will change. Even today, they are targeting militarily and violently Yazidis in Iraq. And I don't think they will postpone their aggression anytime soon.
شكرا جزيلا لك ضيفتي السيدة أوزي بولود، كنت معنا من أثينا. وفي الختام شكرا لكل من تابع واشنطن أونلاين. ألقاكم في حلقة جديدة الأسبوع المقبل، إلى اللقاء.